cowboy was only cleaning her wound, but his hand slipped somewhere forbidden. The sun was beginning its slow descent over the wide open fields, painting the sky in streaks of orange and gold. The ranch had a quiet charm to it, the kind of peace that came from years of routine and hard work. Horses grazed lazily in the pastures, their tails swishing to keep flies away, and a soft breeze carried the scent of hay and earth through the air. The cowboy moved steadily along the fence line, checking for any broken boards or signs of trouble. His boots crunched against the dry dirt as he walked, and the weight of his presence seemed to calm the animals nearby. The woman followed at a cautious distance, her own boots making lighter sounds as she tried not to get in the way. She was visiting the ranch for a few days, sent by a family friend who thought some fresh air and time with animals might do her good. She had grown up in the city, and although she was not unused to hard work, the wide-open spaces and rustic life of a ranch were entirely new to her. She found herself enjoying the simplicity of it, even if it meant sweat on her brow and aching muscles at the end of the day. The cowboy noticed her curiosity and smiled faintly. He had lived on this land all his life, and though he enjoyed the routine, he appreciated seeing someone new discover the rhythm of ranch life. "Be careful near the fence there," he said in a calm voice. "Some of these boards are old and brittle." "Don't lean on them too much."
Ah!
"I'm trying," she replied with a small laugh, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "I didn't expect so many loose nails out here." Her eyes scanned the area, noting the faded paint and weathered wood. "You don't get this in the city." He chuckled quietly, shaking his head. "No, you don't. Out here, everything ages fast, but we make it last." He gestured to the horses grazing nearby. "Even the animals teach you patience."
You can't rush them." She smiled, genuinely intrigued by his calm manner.
There was something about the way he moved, confident, steady, yet gentle, that made the world seem safer. She was so focused on the horses that she didn't notice the board sticking out slightly from the fence until it was too late. Her hand caught on it, and she let out a sharp gasp as the rough wood scraped along her forearm. Pain shot up her arm, and blood began to bead along the cut. "Oh!" she exclaimed, pulling back quickly. She looked at her arm in alarm, seeing the small line of blood that had formed. "It's nothing," she said quickly, trying to brush it off, though the sting made her wince. The cowboy's expression changed immediately. He moved toward her in a few quick, steady steps. "Let me see that," he said gently. His voice held no judgment, only concern. He reached for her arm, examining the cut with care. The sight of blood always caused a subtle urgency in him, and he felt a responsibility to make sure it was cleaned properly. "It's fine," she insisted, though her voice was a little shaky. "It's just a scratch." He shook his head slightly, ignoring her protests. "A scratch can get infected if you don't take care of it." "I'll clean it for you. Just hold still for a minute." He opened the first aid kit he kept in his truck, pulling out antiseptic wipes and a small bandage. His hands were steady, the kind of hands that had worked with animals, fences, and machinery for years.
Yet, even though he was confident in his work, he felt a slight tension as he prepared to clean the wound. The woman's arm was delicate compared to the rugged work he usually handled.
She took a deep breath and allowed him to gently hold her arm. The first touch was brief, and she immediately felt a strange warmth from the contact. She shifted slightly, embarrassed by the sensation, while he quickly dabbed the wound with antiseptic, careful not to hurt her. For a moment, he was completely focused on the task, but even he couldn't deny the awkward energy that passed between them. As he cleaned the cut, his hand brushed her arm in a way that lingered a little too long. He immediately realized it and pulled back, a flicker of red creeping up his neck. "Sorry," he muttered, glancing away. "Didn't mean... it just..." She blinked, caught off guard. Her heart was beating faster than usual. Though partly from the pain, and partly from the sudden closeness. "It's okay," she said quickly, though her voice was softer than she intended. She tried to focus on the bandage in his hands rather than the warmth of his hand against her skin. "Really, it's fine." He nodded, still flustered, and secured the bandage with care. Every movement was precise, careful, but there was an unspoken tension in the air that neither could ignore. She looked away, trying to mask her embarrassment, but she felt her cheeks growing warm. He seemed equally aware of the moment, and yet both of them continued in silence, focusing on the practical task at hand while the unspoken lingered. Once the wound was clean and covered, he stepped back slightly, giving her space. "There," he said, his voice steadier now. "That should do it. Keep it dry and clean, and you'll be fine in a couple of days."
Thank you, really. I was trying to be careful, but I guess I'm not used to this kind of work.
He offered a small smile, though his eyes were still a little troubled from the earlier moment. "It's okay, Dees.
Happens to the best of us. You're learning, and that's what matters."
There was a pause, and then he added, almost shyly, "You handled it better than most city folks would." She laughed lightly, a sound that seemed to ease the tension. "I hope so. Bah. I'm just glad it's nothing serious." For the next few minutes, they both lingered near the fence, neither quite ready to leave. The horses in the field shifted their weight, but otherwise the ranch was quiet. The cowboy found himself stealing glances at her, noticing details he hadn't before. The way the sunlight caught her hair, the curve of her smile, the way her hands moved as she adjusted her jacket. He shook his head subtly, telling himself to focus on something practical. He wasn't usually distracted in this way. She, too, felt an unusual awareness of him, the way he moved, the gentleness in his hands, the quiet confidence. It was unlike anyone she had ever met. She found herself lingering in the moment, reluctant to return to the mundane chores. There was an energy between them, something unspoken and electric, that neither had experienced before. Finally, she straightened, taking a careful step back. "I should probably get back to helping with the horses," she said, trying to sound casual, though her voice betrayed a hint of nervousness. He nodded, understanding. "Sure. Just take it easy with your arm. No heavy lifting for now." As she walked back toward the paddock, he lingered a moment longer, watching her. There was a strange mix of respect and fascination in his gaze. He had never been one to rush into feelings, but something about this moment, the accident, the touch, the shared silence, had left an impression he couldn't ignore. She glanced over her shoulder at him, catching his gaze. There was a brief unspoken acknowledgement between them, a recognition that something had shifted in the past few minutes. Neither spoke, but both understood that this small accident had changed something, however subtle, in the rhythm of their day. The sun continued to dip lower, casting long shadows across the fields. The horses moved slowly, grazing in the fading light, and the cowboy returned to his work, though his mind was elsewhere. The woman tended to the animals with careful attention, her thoughts drifting back to the earlier moment. She reminded herself that it had been an accident, nothing more. But she couldn't deny the flutter in her chest when she remembered the warmth of his hand and the gentleness in his voice. As the evening deepened, the ranch took on a softer tone. The golden light faded to dusky purples and blues, and the quiet hum of the countryside filled the air. The cowboy and the woman moved about their tasks, each aware of the other's presence, each sharing a silent understanding that the day had been different from any they had known before. The bond forged in the few simple moments. The accident, the wound, the care was subtle, fragile, and real, and although neither would speak of it aloud yet, both felt it keenly, an unspoken promise of something more lingering in the air between them. The night settled over the ranch with a gentle hush, broken only by the distant calls of owls and the soft rustle of leaves in the evening breeze. The stars twinkled faintly, scattered across the dark velvet sky, and the moonlight cast silver shadows over the fields and barns. Inside the ranch house, the warm glow of lamps and the scent of freshly baked bread made the place feel inviting, comforting, and safe. The woman sat near the fireplace, her arm carefully resting on the arm of a wooden chair. The bandage was secure and the stinging from the cut had mostly faded, yet she found herself frequently glancing toward the door, as though expecting him to come in and check on her again. She shook her head slightly, chiding herself for thinking of him so much. It had been an accident, just a moment, and yet it lingered in her mind like a quiet melody she couldn't forget. The cowboy, meanwhile, had retreated to a corner of the living area, settling into his usual seat by the fireplace. His work boots were dusty from the day, and the faint smell of leather and earth clung to him. He had cleaned up as best he could, but his mind was not on the chores he had left undone. Every few minutes he would glance at her, noticing the small ways she moved, how she adjusted her hair, how her fingers brushed against the bandage, how she seemed so careful yet unaware of the way he was watching her.
He shook his head slightly.
He wasn't usually distracted by anyone. Work came first, routines came first, and he rarely let feelings get in the way. But there was something different about her. Something about her presence, calm yet lively, curious yet cautious, had stirred something in him. He tried to focus on reading the ranch ledger, counting feed supplies, making plans for the next day. But each time he glanced up, there she was, and his thoughts wandered again. "I hope you're not in too much pain," he said finally, his voice low but steady. He had moved closer, settling himself on the edge of her chair without really thinking about it. His eyes studied her arm gently, though he was careful not to touch it again without reason. "It's fine," she replied, her voice soft, but there was a note of appreciation that she didn't try to hide. "You cleaned it so well. I didn't expect it to heal this quickly." She gave a small, polite smile, hoping to keep things casual, though inside her heart still raced from earlier. He nodded, leaning back slightly. "It's just a scratch, but still, best to be careful. You don't want it getting infected." There was a pause, a quiet silence that stretched between them, filled only by the soft crackle of the fire. He could sense her unease, her effort to stay composed, but he also felt the subtle tension that had begun when his hand had brushed hers earlier. She shifted slightly in her seat, trying to focus on something else, but her gaze kept drifting to him. There was a kind of comfort in his presence, even as it brought a strange warmth she hadn't expected. He seemed so different from the people she knew in the city. Steady, dependable, aware, yet quietly self-conscious in a way that made him human, approachable. For a few moments, they both sat in silence, each aware of the other's presence. He thought about how careful he had been, how he had apologized immediately when his hand had slipped. He worried that it might have made her uncomfortable, yet he also knew there had been a fleeting connection, a subtle spark that neither of them could deny. "I didn't mean to make things awkward earlier," he said finally, his voice quiet but sincere. "I just wasn't thinking."
I hope I didn't upset you.
She looked at him, meeting his gaze. There was honesty in his eyes, a vulnerability that she hadn't expected. She felt a sudden rush of empathy for him.
"It's okay," she replied softly.
Breath. "You didn't upset me. It was just a little surprising, that's all." She tried to smile, but the edges of her lips betrayed her nervousness. "I know, you were just helping." He nodded, seeming to relax slightly at her words. "Good. I just want to make sure you're safe. That's all." He paused, glancing down at her bandaged arm. "You're not used to this kind of work, I can tell." It takes some getting used to.
She laughed quietly, shaking her head.
Didn't grow up around animals or farms. I've never had to do chores like this before.
Everything is new, and sometimes I feel like I don't belong out here. You'll get the hang of it, he said confidently, though gently.
It takes time, but you'll learn. And you're already doing better than most visitors.
You got a good instinct with animals. His words were encouraging, and she felt a flush of pride despite herself.
Thanks, she said, genuinely grateful for the compliment. The warmth of his approval made her heart flutter in a way she wasn't used to. Breaths. She looked down at her bandaged arm, then back at him, and realized she was aware of him in a way that went beyond simple politeness or curiosity. For the next hour they talked quietly, sharing small stories about life, family, and childhood memories. I spoke of the city, the crowded streets, and the constant rush of people, while he shared his experiences growing up on the ranch, the lessons he had learned from horses, and the importance of patience and respect for nature. They laughed occasionally, and the tension of the earlier moments softened into a gentle, shared camaraderie. Yet even amid the conversation, the undercurrent of something unspoken remained. Every time their hands brushed or their eyes met across the room, there was a subtle electricity that neither could ignore.
She found herself thinking about the way he had cared for her earlier, the careful way he had held her arm, the soft concern in his eyes.
She tried to push it aside, telling herself it was just an accident, just a brief moment. But her heart didn't listen. He, too, felt the pull of the unspoken tension. He reminded himself that he needed to remain professional, respectful, and careful. She was a guest, after all, and he did not want to make her uncomfortable. Yet every time she smiled, every time she laughed, every time her eyes met his, he felt drawn to her in a way he had not expected. As the night deepened, the ranch seemed to shrink into a cocoon of quiet warmth. The fire cast flickering shadows across the walls, and the soft hum of crickets and distant animals filled the silence between words. They continued talking, each careful not to touch too much, yet each aware of the subtle closeness they shared. Finally, she leaned back in her chair, stretching her arms slightly. "I should probably get some rest soon," she said softly. Her voice carried a note of reluctance, as though she did not want the evening to end. He nodded, standing up and brushing off his jeans. "Sure. I'll make sure everything is locked up outside, and then we can call it a night." He paused, then added quietly, "I'll check on your arm again before bed, just to be sure it's still okay." She smiled, a small, genuine smile that warmed his heart. "Thank you. I appreciate it."
There was a brief pause, and then she added, almost shyly, "You've been very kind." He nodded, feeling a rare warmth spread through him.
"It's nothing." Just doing what's right. He glanced down at her arm again, ensuring the bandage was still in place. "All good."
Nothing to worry about. They moved through the ranch quietly, performing small chores and checking the animals.
Every glance, every gesture was careful, deliberate, yet both of them were aware of the lingering tension between them. The evening air was cool, and the gentle rustle of leaves accompanied their movements. When it was finally time to head to their rooms, they exchanged a brief nod, a silent acknowledgement of the day's events. There was no need for words. Both knew that something had shifted between them. Something subtle, unspoken, but undeniably present. As she settled into her room, she found herself thinking back to the earlier moments, the accidental touch, his careful hands, the sincerity in his eyes. She reminded herself that it had been a mistake, just a fleeting accident. But the warmth and connection lingered, leaving her heart a little lighter and a little more aware of him. He, in his own room, replayed the day in his mind, He tried to focus on the practical tasks of the ranch, but the memory of her smile, the softness in her voice, the way she had handled the moment with such grace stayed with him. He shook his head, chuckling quietly to himself. He wasn't one to be distracted, yet she had managed to do just that, without even trying. Outside, the night stretched over the ranch in quiet serenity. The stars glimmered above, and the moon cast its silver light across the fields. Inside, the two of them rested, each carrying the unspoken connection from the day, a spark of something new, something fragile, but something that had taken root in the quiet moments between gestures and glances. Neither knew what tomorrow would bring, nor how the connection would grow, but both felt it keenly. And for the first time in a long while, the quiet of the ranch held a new promise. A possibility of understanding, closeness, and perhaps something more. The ranch was quiet in the early morning light. The first rays of the sun stretched across the fields, turning the dew on the grass into tiny, sparkling diamonds. Birds began their morning songs, and the smell of fresh hay and earth filled the air. It was a new day, yet the quiet energy from the previous evening lingered, soft and persistent, in both the cowboy and the woman's thoughts. She stepped outside, wrapped in a light shawl against the crisp morning air. Her arm was fully healed now, the bandage replaced with a clean cloth that barely left a mark. She walked slowly, taking in the soft morning light and the peaceful rhythm of the ranch. It was quiet in a way that city mornings never were. No honking cars, no hurried footsteps, only the gentle sounds of life beginning anew. The cowboy emerged from the barn a few minutes later, holding a bucket of feed. He noticed her walking along the fence, her gaze directed toward the fields. He felt a small pang of something he could not easily name, a curiosity, a warmth, a pull he had not felt before. Normally he would have focused on chores without thought, but today he found himself walking toward her instead of tending to the animals first. "Good morning," he said, his voice low but carrying over the soft rustle of the wind.
Morning, she replied, turning to him with a small, polite smile.
There was a brief pause, the kind that is filled with unsaid words and quiet observation. She felt herself aware of his presence in a way that made her heartbeat quicken, though she tried to hide it behind her calm exterior. He hesitated for a moment before speaking again. "How's your arm?" "Yes. This. Feeling better?"
Yes, she said, lifting her arm slightly. It doesn't hurt at all now.
Thank you for yesterday, for taking care of it. Her eyes met his for a moment, and she saw the sincerity there. She couldn't deny that the memory of his careful hands lingered in her thoughts even now. He nodded, a faint smile tugging at his lips. Good. I was worried for a bit. I just didn't want it to get infected, that's all. There was a pause, and he added quietly, I hope I didn't make you uncomfortable. Her breath caught slightly at the words. She had thought about this moment, worried about it, and yet now that he spoke them so honestly, she felt a warmth spread through her chest. You didn't, she replied softly. It was just unexpected. That's all. But it's fine. Really. He studied her for a moment, as though trying to read her expression. There was honesty in her eyes, a subtle softness that made him feel both nervous and calm at the same time. He felt drawn to her in a way that surprised him, a pull he wasn't used to feeling with anyone. He shook his head slightly, reminding himself to stay grounded. She was a guest, and he needed to respect that. Yet every glance, every movement, every small smile from her seemed to reach him in ways he could not ignore. They walked together toward the barn, where the horses waited for their morning feeding. She tried to focus on the task, picking up buckets and helping him pour feed into the troughs. The rhythm of their work allowed for small glances, brief touches, as they passed each other and moments where hands nearly brushed. Each encounter was electric in its subtlety, a quiet spark neither dared to acknowledge openly. "You've got a good hand with the animals," he said quietly as she gently stroked the mane of a horse. "Most people are too rough or nervous. You're patient, careful." She blushed slightly, a hint of surprise in her expression. "Thank you." "I've learned a lot in just a couple of days here. The horses, they seem to respond to calmness, don't they?" He nodded, watching her closely. "They do. They can sense when someone is tense or unsure." "You've got a natural way about you. It's rare." His eyes lingered on her, noting the subtle movements, the quiet strength beneath her polite exterior. He wanted to say more, to tell her that he felt a connection he had never expected, but he stopped himself. He needed to respect her space. As they finished feeding the horses, they paused near the fence, leaning slightly against the worn wood. The breeze stirred their hair, and for a moment everything seemed still, except for the sound of their breathing and the soft morning hum of the ranch. I wanted to apologize again," he said, his voice soft, almost hesitant. "About yesterday. I didn't mean to make things awkward." "I was just focused on helping you. But I can see now that it might have felt different." She looked at him, noticing the genuine concern in his expression. Her own chest tightened with a mix of emotions: gratitude, curiosity, and a flutter of something she couldn't name. "You don't need to apologize," she said, her voice gentle. "I understand. You were just helping. It's okay." He hesitated, then took a small step closer, careful to give her space, yet unable to resist the pull toward her. I want to be honest with you," he said slowly. "I didn't expect to feel this connection, but I do, and I don't want you to think I don't know what to—" perilous or forward. "I just, Breath caught at his words. She had felt the same pull, the same quiet tension building since the accident, but she had tried to dismiss it. Now, hearing him speak it aloud, she felt a mixture of relief and nervous excitement. I
know what you mean," she said softly. "I felt it too. I wasn't sure if I should acknowledge it or just pretend it didn't exist."
But I can't stop thinking about it either.
There was a quiet pause as they stood near the fence, the morning sun casting long shadows across the fields.
A connection between them, unspoken until now, was palpable. Each was aware of the other's presence in a new way, a way that went beyond politeness or routine. There was respect, care, and an undeniable tension that neither could ignore. He reached out almost instinctively and adjusted the shawl on her shoulders. The movement was careful, considerate, and yet it carried a subtle intimacy that made both of them aware of each other in a new way. Neither pulled back immediately. The moment lingered, filled with shared understanding and quiet electricity. I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable, he murmured again, his voice barely above a whisper. I care about you, and I wanted to make sure you were safe. She looked into his eyes and saw the sincerity there. Her heart swelled with a mix of emotions: gratitude, warmth, and something deeper, something that scared and excited her at the same time. "I know," she said softly. I feel the same. I didn't want to admit it, but I do." They stood in silence for a moment, the world around them fading into the background. The horses grazed quietly in the distance, the wind whispered through the trees, and the ranch seemed to hold its breath. For the first time they acknowledged the feelings that had been quietly growing since the first touch of his hand on her arm. Finally, he gave a small, shy smile, stepping back slightly to give her space. "I don't want to rush anything," he said gently. "We can take things slow. I just wanted you to know how I feel." She smiled in return, feeling a mix of relief and joy. "Bah."
I'm glad you told me," she said. "I don't want to rush either."
"But I want to see where this goes." They returned to their morning tasks, but the mood had shifted. Each glance, each word, each small gesture carried a deeper meaning now. The unspoken tension had transformed into a quiet understanding, a connection that neither could deny. As the day progressed, they worked together seamlessly, feeding animals, repairing fences, and checking on the horses. Their movements were synchronized, their words lighter, their smiles more frequent. There was a new energy between them, a sense of companionship and understanding that had not existed before. Even during breaks, they found themselves sitting near each other, sharing small jokes, stories, and quiet observations about the ranch. Every touch, every brush of hands, every shared glance reminded them of the confession they had just shared, and both found comfort in knowing the other felt the same spark. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, the warmth of the day mirrored the warmth in their hearts. They both knew that the journey ahead would be filled with learning, understanding, and patience. But for the first time, they felt that they were on the same path, moving forward together with a mutual awareness and respect for each other. By the time evening came, they were exhausted but content. The bond that had begun with a small accident had now grown into something real, a connection built on care, honesty, and a shared acknowledgement of feelings that neither could ignore. As they sat near the fire that night, reflecting on the day, the quiet tension of part one had transformed into something deeper. Mutual trust, unspoken affection, and the gentle promise of a relationship that could grow slowly, naturally, and beautifully. Both felt a sense of peace, knowing that whatever came next, they were aware of each other in a new, meaningful way. The night closed in around the ranch, but the spark between them burned quietly, patiently, waiting for the right moments to grow even stronger. The next morning arrived quietly, with sunlight streaming gently over the rolling fields. The ranch was alive with soft sounds, the low neighing of horses, the rustle of the wind through the trees, and the distant call of a rooster signaling the start of another day. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of dew and freshly tilled soil. It was peaceful, yet there was a quiet anticipation in the atmosphere that neither the cowboy nor the woman could ignore. She stood at the edge of the porch, stretching slightly as she took in the morning beauty. Her arm, now fully healed, moved freely without the reminder of pain. She felt lighter, more at ease, yet there was a small flutter in her chest as she thought about the conversation from the night before. The honesty they had shared, the feelings they had finally acknowledged, lingered in her mind like a soft echo she couldn't shake. The cowboy emerged from the barn, holding a bucket of fresh water. He paused when he saw her, his eyes softening. There was a quiet smile on his face, a mix of relief and happiness. He had spent the night thinking about her, about how the accident had unexpectedly brought them closer. He had worried about making her uncomfortable, about moving too fast. But now, seeing her there, he felt that the connection they had was real and mutual.
"Morning," he said, his voice calm yet carrying a note of warmth.
"Good morning," she replied, her lips curving into a gentle smile. She felt a small thrill as she noticed the way he looked at her, attentive, sincere, and completely present. There was a comfort in it, but also a quiet excitement. She could feel that today would be different, that the bond they had begun to build was ready to grow. He set the bucket down and walked toward her.
Did you sleep well?
He asked, glancing at her with a subtle curiosity. I did, she said. It was peaceful here. Very different from the city. She looked around at the fields, the barns, and the horses.
I didn't realize how much I would enjoy this. And he nodded, understanding in his eyes. It takes some getting used to, but once you find the rhythm, it's not so hard.
There's a kind of quiet comfort to it. He paused, then added gently, I'm glad you're here. She felt a warmth spread through her at his words.
I'm glad too, she said softly. It's been more than just the work.
It's the people. You've made it special. For a moment they stood in silence, simply watching the horses graze in the morning light. The connection between them was quiet but strong, like a thread that had been weaving itself since the first accidental touch on her arm. There was no rush, no pressure, only the understanding that they cared for each other in a way neither had expected. The day began with chores, as it always did, but the atmosphere was different now. They worked side by side, feeding the animals, checking fences, and repairing the barn door. Their movements were coordinated without speaking, a silent rhythm that spoke more than words ever could. Every brush of hands, every shared glance, carried the subtle acknowledgement of the feelings they had confessed the night before. During a brief break, they sat on the porch steps, sipping water and watching the horses. The sun had climbed higher in the sky, warming their shoulders and faces. I can't believe how quickly the time has passed, she said softly. It feels like I just arrived, but also like I've been here. Forever. He looked at her, noticing the thoughtful expression on her face. I know what you mean, he said. Days can feel long here when you're busy, but moments like this, they seem to stretch and linger. I'm glad we get to share them. She smiled at him, a quiet, sincere smile that made his chest feel light. Me too, she whispered. The afternoon brought more work, but the pace was relaxed. They tended to the horses, checked the fences, and watered the plants, each task an opportunity to be near each other, to share words and laughter. She noticed the way he moved with ease and confidence, yet with gentle care, and felt a growing admiration for him. Desp, he wasn't just strong and capable. He was thoughtful, patient, and considerate. He, in turn, noticed the way she approached tasks with determination and care, even when she was unsure. She was strong in a quiet way, graceful even in her clumsiness, and he found himself drawn to her more with each passing moment. There was a balance between them, a complement of strengths and vulnerabilities that made working together natural and comforting. As the sun began to lower toward the horizon, painting the fields with shades of gold and amber, they took a moment to rest. Sitting on the edge of the barn, they shared a quiet conversation, laughing softly at small anecdotes from their past. The tension of the earlier days had softened into a gentle intimacy, a mutual understanding that neither needed to speak aloud.
I never expected to feel this way, he admitted quietly, glancing at her from the corner of his eye.
I didn't think a simple accident could lead to this.
But it did, and I'm not unhappy about it.
She felt her heart warm at his honesty.
Neither am I,
she said softly.
I wasn't sure how to feel at first, but now, I'm glad it happened. I'm glad we understand each other.
There was a pause, a quiet moment where the world seemed to hold still around them. The horses shifted in the field, the breeze rustled the trees, and the faint scent of hay and earth filled the air. It was a perfect, peaceful moment, yet it carried a sense of anticipation, as though something important was quietly building between them.
He reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face with a gentle hand.
The touch was careful, respectful, yet there was an undeniable intimacy in it. She did not pull away. Instead, she felt the warmth of his hand linger for a heartbeat longer than necessary, and she realized she wanted it to. I want to be honest, he said softly. I care about you. More than I expected. More than I should, maybe. But I can't ignore it anymore. Her heart fluttered. She had felt the same pull, the same quiet tension growing each day, and now hearing him speak it aloud made her chest tighten with a mix of excitement and relief.
I feel the same,
she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper.
I didn't know how to say it before, but
I care about you too. He smiled, a genuine heartfelt smile that made her feel lighter, freer.
I'm glad, he said simply. We don't have to rush anything.
We can take our time, figure things out together. She nodded, feeling a sense of calm and happiness wash over her. I'd like that, she said softly, to take our time and see where this goes. The rest of the day passed in a comfortable rhythm. They continued their chores, but now there was a subtle difference in every glance, every touch, every shared smile. The connection they had acknowledged was no longer unspoken. It was present, tangible, and growing with each moment. As evening approached, they stood near the fence, watching the sun dip below the horizon. The sky was painted in soft pinks and purples, the colors reflected in the eyes of the horses grazing nearby. The air was warm from the day, cooling slightly as the night approached, carrying the scents of earth and grass and the faint smoke of the fireplace in the distance. I'm going to miss this, she said quietly, looking out over the fields. Even if it's just a visit, this place, and this time, it's special.
He looked at her, his expression thoughtful.
It is special, he agreed. And I hope it's not the last time you're here. She turned to him, feeling a small smile tug at her lips. I hope so too, she said softly. I think I'd like to come back. He nodded, feeling a warmth in his chest. You're always welcome here, he said gently. As long as you want to be.
They stood together in silence for a few moments, the quiet of the ranch surrounding them, the connection between them stronger than ever.
There was no need for grand gestures, no need for hurried words or declarations. The bond they shared was simple, real, and full of possibility. As the stars began to appear in the night sky, the two of them walked back toward the ranch house side by side. Their steps were easy, their movements synchronized, and the quiet intimacy between them spoke louder than words ever could. They had shared an accident, a moment of vulnerability, and through it, they had discovered a connection neither had expected, but both had quietly wanted. That night, as they settled into their rooms, they each carried the warmth of the day and the acknowledgement of their feelings. There was no rush, no pressure, only the promise of what could come. The spark that had begun with a small accident had grown into something steady, patient, and real. A connection built on trust, honesty, and care. And as the ranch fell into quiet sleep, the world outside held its breath, leaving room for the possibilities of tomorrow.